episode of Kev's Defender project. This is the second part of a dashboard refurb we're doing. So today we're going to be looking at replacing the instrument binnacle. Now anybody who's taken one apart before knows that the plastic is pretty brittle, so all the tabs where the screws hold it together, most of them have fallen off if you've had your car for any length of time. Mine, they're pretty much all missing, so I did a bit of looking around and I found a company called Raptor Engineering. Now they do a bunch of replacement parts and upgrades for Defenders, and they do a metal binnacle mount which actually looks quite nice. They've got a deluxe version that has another bezel. The great thing about Raptor Engineering is they offer a lifetime guarantee on their parts, so even if it were to break, which it won't because it's metal, then I'll easily be able to get it replaced. So without further ado, let's go and take a look. So, first job is to get the steering wheel off. It's not strictly speaking necessary, but it does mean it's a lot easier to get everything that's back here. So for this you're going to need a 19mm socket and ratchet, and it's literally just hold the steering wheel and undo the nut. Now don't take the nut all the way off, because otherwise you're going to smack yourself in the face. So put the nut back on a little bit and then give the wheel a tug until it comes free. Then you can undo the nut, and because the wheel's loose, it'll now come off. Now what you should probably do at that point, before you take the wheel off, is actually put a mark on the steering wheel and the steering column so that you can line it up again. I've already done that. You won't be able to see it, but there's a tiny dot of Tipp-Ex here which corresponds to a dot on the steering wheel. Right, now we've done that, we can start taking the screws off. Now as we've discussed in the intro, a lot of the screws here are going to be missing because the tabs that the screws go into are broken off, and that's why we're replacing it. So I had one screw holding this in which I took out earlier on, so mine's now nice and loose. Now if you look behind here, you've got a connection to the Speedo, and what you need to do is squeeze these two white bits together and pull it off, which is fairly straightforward. And then you could start pulling all these wires off from the back. Now there's actually an easier way, because it looks like that's where they all connect, but if you dig a little bit further into the steering column, you'll find there is a multi-connector and two connectors for the indicator bulbs. And then we've got it out apart from, you probably won't have this one because this is for a non-standard gauge. This is a rev counter, at least I think it's non-standard anyway, but this wire goes off to the negative feed on the coil so I can get an RPM feed. And so now that's the dashboard out. So that's the first part. Next part we're going to need to do is get the binnacle mount off, which is this part here. So what we're going to need there is a 5/16, or at a push an 8mm socket will do, and there are 4 bolts. At some point before I had this, the guy must have lost one of these bolts because there's a screw in this last hole, but it doesn't matter, there's 4 things holding it in. Now if you have a Defender that's not as damaged as mine, then you'll probably have a screw here holding the controller on for the heater, but I don't because mine's knackered. So mine will just mostly pull out, apart from the connectors for the fan.
Once the control cable's been disconnected, there's just 2 screws holding on the controller assembly. Once this has been removed, we can easily just slide out the binnacle mount.
Okay, so now we've got our binnacle mount and our instrument binnacle out of the car. Let's go into the workshop and compare them with the new ones. So these are the old parts that we've just taken off, and these are the new parts from Raptor Engineering. Now you may think that they look very similar, and in fact they do because they're direct replacements. However, this one is made of plastic, and as you can see, it's very easy for the tabs to come off, so that it makes things very difficult to stick back together again. You can see that that's broken. I've tried gluing it, but that's not very good. The new Raptor ones are made out of metal, so they're not going to break. They've been nicely coated, really well put together. So all we've got to do now is basically transfer the parts over from this one to these ones. Now we'll start with the binnacle mount. I've already moved over the controller for the fan, the heater fan. We now need to move over these little plastic things. I think you might be able to see them in here. There. These are what the external parts screw onto. Then also this metal bar at the bottom needs to be swapped over as well. So we'll go ahead and do that. Now, when you swap things over, don't do the screws up too tight, because we're going to need to adjust things to get it all lined up nicely when we get it back on the car. This plastic thing will come out fairly easily if you squeeze the tabs together with a pair of pliers, and then it'll just pop out the back end. Okay, so that's the binnacle mount done. Now we need to go on to the main binnacle itself. Now, basically all we need to do for this is move the gauges over into here, and also the light panel. Now the light panel is going to be the easiest part, so we'll do that first. There's just 2 screws at the front, and then all the indicator lights will just pop out. And then the nice thing about the Raptor one is we've got these snazzy button head hex screws, which look pretty nice. So we just need to pop those out, pop the lights into the hole, and then do the bolts back up again. Now the next thing to do is going to be these instruments. There's a lot of wiring on the back, and it's going to be easy to get it confused. When I put the first part of the dashboard back together, I got the fuel gauge and the temperature mixed up, so I got some very strange readings when I was driving. Anyway, now that we managed to get it all out with the multi-connector, we're just going to swap them over one by one. So I'm going to put them side by side, and then I'm just going to transfer the dials over from one to the other, and then as I do that, I'm just going to reconnect all the wires as I go. So we'll do the big one first. We'll do the Speedo. It's got these little clips on the back, so it goes in from the front, but it's fixed in from the back, if you see what I mean. So you need to take off these arms, I guess. You need to take off these arms from the back, and then we just pop the dial out from the front, put it back into our new binnacle, make sure it's straight in the holder, put the legs back on, and then tighten up the thumb screws. So now we're going to take out the temperature gauge. Because this is a smaller gauge, it's got one kind of double leg on the back, and the pin in the middle also serves as the earth for it. So we'll just keep that screw over there with the leg. We'll disconnect the 2 wires, pop our temperature gauge out, pop it into our new housing, screw back on. Yeah, just make sure it's straight. And then we know that, well, actually it won't reach. The only one that will reach is the spade. This is the great thing about doing this when they're next to each other. You don't need to remember about labelling them up so that you remember where you put them back on when you transfer it over to somewhere else. They're just going straight over. So let's go ahead and disconnect the next one. Pull the dial out, pop it back into this one. Now we can transfer this last one over. the front bezel, so Binnacle, is now done. So there's a couple of things we've got to do to the mount just before we go back and put it in. These little tabs are adjustable. So basically I'm just going to loosen this off so that when we get it in the car we can actually move them around and get it lined up perfectly. So the kit you get from Raptor provides all the connectors you need. So we've got the captive nuts, we've got the long button head machine screws and the short ones as well. Basically what we're going to need to do is these two tabs that we have on the side, which are adjustable, so once we get it in the car we can get it lined up exactly how we want. That's where we need to put the machine screws, sorry, not the machine screws, the captive nuts, and they just slide on with a bit of a push like that. So the other two captive nuts that we've got actually need to go on the bottom of the binnacle itself. So we'll just push those onto these two tabs. So now basically once we put it all back together in the car, the dash and the mount are going to fit together like that, and then we're going to put these machine screws through and screw everything on together like that. Oh, and just arrived in the post are these. So Raptor do these extra bezels. You can see they do a black one and a silver one. So basically what happens here is it overlays and kind of gives it a little bit more of a recessed look. So this is what it looks like standard. I've already taken the screws out, so we just have to pop that out. So if I put the black one on, it just pops on. It's really easy, then you'll just do the screws up. And that's what it looks like with the black one on. The dials are slightly more recessed, and if you put the silver one on, just kind of brushed stainless look, then it looks like that. Now I actually quite like this one, the silver, so I'm going to go ahead and put all the screws back in, and then we'll go and fit this to the car. First thing we're going to need to do to put all this back together is to refit the binnacle mount. Now I've left some of the screws a bit loose, and that's so that we can adjust everything later. What I'm going to do is feed the mount into the hole. Dash into place. It is quite a tight fit, but it will go, as you can see, and there we go, that's all in place. Now all we need to do now is put all the screws in, line it up a little bit, and then we're all done. So all the screws are in now. As you may remember from before, I said just don't do them all up tight because you'll need to do a little bit of adjustment, and now that's all on nice and straight. So now I'm going to tighten them all up and we're done. So while I was talking about doing up all those screws, the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that this bit is still wobbling about, and this needs to go behind this part of the dashboard, this corner of the dashboard. So we can fix that. There you go. So we really are nearly finished now.
And here it is finished. I think it's a vast improvement over the original, especially with the contrasting bezel. I think it's an upgrade well worth having on any Defender.
So there you have it. A simple job that requires no special tools, and I think it vastly improves the look of the cab, as well as addressing some of the problems of the original plastic dashboard where parts would break off quite easily. If you're interested in this upgrade, then I'll put a link to Raptor Engineering's website here so you can go straight over. And thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing, please subscribe, please tell others. If you don't like what I'm doing, please tell me so I can do something about it. And I'll see you next time when I'll be doing something else fun to my Land Rover.